if you could, in the chat, if you could put in your full name, your place of birth, where your parent or guardians were born, and if you could be as specific as possible. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start. So yeah, let's see. For me, I'm not going to drop it in, but I'm going to let you know. Yeah, so my name is Melinda Cherie Martinez. My mom thought she loved my middle name. And she said, oh, you can be Cherie or Sheree. It's up to you. So you decide. You decide how you want to pronounce it. I was born in a hospital called the Little Company of Mary in Torrance, California, off Crenshaw Boulevard. My mom is from Panama City, Panama. And my dad is from a little ranch town, Medinales, New Mexico. He was born at home. I see that we have in the chat, we have Miss Giselle Marie Roberson from Los Angeles Community Hospital, Santa Ana, and El Salvador in the house, and Berkeley. Ooh, Berkeley. I didn't know that, Giselle. Okay, cool. We got Anna Bach from Oakland, both parents from Saigon. All right, Saigon, Vietnam. Way across the other side of the world, we have San Diego. Oh, San Diego. Tijuana in the house, San Diego in the house, SoCal, Oakland. We got, Jalisco, La Crucera de Santa Maria. Ooh, okay. We have Brian, Christopher, Tuminelli, and Folsom, California, Brooklyn, New York, and Yuba City, California. We got Hayward, Afghanistan, more San Diego. We have Okinawa, Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's where my mom first came. When she came to the States, that's where she was at, in Tulsa. Okinawa, wow, oh my God, Rebecca. And we got Berkeley, Alhambra, so North and Southern California. Scottish Highlands, all right. And we also have the Philippines, Manila with Mr. Tanyaya. And then, we got St. Luke's Hospital in San Francisco and Puebla, and Morelia, and we have Kansas City. We got Riverside, Bakersfield, San Jose, deep roots in San Jose on all sides. And we got Guatemala, double Guatemala, okay, and San Rafael, awesome. So, we come from so many different places. Our students come from so many places. We just wanted to do this activity so that we could get to know each other a little bit more. Something that you could also do in the classroom. Sometimes our students feel like, they're in a classroom with their cuentistas and they don't have a lot to write about. They don't have a lot of individuality. They might feel that way. And I think this is a really good exercise to show that, no, there are so many specifics and individual traits and cultures and traditions that you are from, and just, all of these, every single place in here, and I haven't even finished reading them all, has such rich culture, rich history, and so much to write about. And today we're focusing on writing. We have also, I didn't get to mention, Seattle, Washington, and Wyoming. Ooh, a cattle ranch that has, been in my family since the great-grandparents homestead in the 1800s. What? All right, well, so we have such a rich tapestry of people and individuals in our Puente community. What a great place to be a part of. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and start with looking at our student writing. This was sent to you a couple days ago, and if you had a chance, maybe you got to look at the Padlet. But if you haven't, we're going to go ahead and take 7 minutes to look at the Padlet. These were all the pieces of writing that were sent to Giselle and I. And so you can see it's broken out into genre. So take your time. We're going to put on some beautiful music, and we're going to go for about 7 minutes. I think I'm a little, am I 3 minutes over where I'm supposed to be? So maybe 5 minutes, sorry. We're gonna go 5 minutes on this. So 5 minutes to look over. Enjoy. The Padlets, Anna dropped the link, so you should be able to go into Padlet and check it out. Questions? If you have questions, you could just unmute yourself or put in the chat. All right, we got 5 minutes. So we're at the end of 5 minutes. If you want to keep looking at the Padlet, that's fine. We're going to do a little bit of writing. And so if you could have out your journals, we're going to do a KWL plus. We're going to start with the K and the W first. So the first prompt, if you want to go ahead and write for the first 5 minutes on the both the K and the W, what K, what we know, what can we celebrate in the writing that was shared? Lots of things to celebrate. And what do we know has been working for us, both as a collective and also individually in your classroom in the teaching of writing. We want to know that, and we want to know what you know. Also the W, if you could work on that for the next 5 minutes in writing in your notebook, is what burning issues remain for you in relation to teaching writing, especially in a distance learning format. And so we're going to take 5 minutes. If you still want to explore the Padlet and need a little bit more time on that, altogether we'll have 5 minutes of writing and exploring. Okay, if you could wrap up your last thoughts. So we still had a couple people joining us. All right. So we're going to be moving into a little bit of group work and some breakout rooms to talk about our K and our W. The K, what we have to celebrate, what we know is working, our W, what issues we still have. So the way that we're going to do this is if you could pick one person that is familiar, hopefully, with Jamboard to do the writing, to capture your thoughts. We're going to spend 8 minutes. If you are not familiar with Jamboard, Giselle's going to give a quick tutorial.
Thank you, Melinda. So if you're not familiar, like she just said, very easy. Obviously, just click on this. On the left-hand side, you'll see these little icons. You can just click on the little sticky and type in, whatever you guys are discussing. And then you pick a color and then save it, and it will save to the Jamboard, and then you can drag and drop it if it's a K or a W. And then if you can stay on this page, we would appreciate that. Later on, we will go to page 2, which is the L+. But right now, we're just going over the KW.
All right. Looks like folks are already jumping on board the Jamboard, and we're going to go ahead and put you in some breakout rooms. So we're going to go ahead and we have about 15 minutes to, talk about this in a big group. I think for me, as far as, when we do our portfolio scoring, I think this is the most important part. I think that, this is where y'all get to learn from each other, where you get to share, where we really need to, we get at, the heart of, the things that we need to work on, the things that we're having questions about. And so this is super important. I want to, read through all of your sticky notes, and if you do, we have 15 minutes to unpack this. So if you, if you hear your group sticky note being read and want to unmute yourself and talk about it a little bit more, feel free to do that. For me, I have a little bit of a hard time, I'm going to be honest, like multitasking in terms of like making sure that if I call on you and look at all the sticky notes at the same time. So if you would be so kind, if you do want to speak up and say something, if you could just unmute yourself, that would be super helpful. Okay. All right. Thank you. Hi, Jeannie. I can see you now. Yay. Okay. All right, so I have under the K, creative ways to access and see student writing. Never before have we had so much creativity in the way that we are showcasing each student writing, and the way, I mean, this has been, I think for us, as a program, digital portfolios have always seemed like such a scary thing, right? And then like now we're kind of being forced into doing writing in such a way that is 100% reliant on technology. And so it's just been like this explosion of creativity, and we're going to hear from Rebecca later, and she's going to show you what she did with that. So yeah, that's been amazing. Different platforms, again, that has been fantastic. If we go full throttle, I'm reading a yellow on the top. If we go full throttle pre-COVID writing, we'll lose many of them.
That's me, Melinda.
Okay, do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
I haven't started anything resembling a multi-paragraph essay.
Got it.
And I think I'm also projecting my fears that if I do, I will lose a bunch of my students. And we were talking in the break room about the cameras on thing, and I fuss over my students when I see their facial expressions, and they like it. It's kind of like a benevolent fussing, like, hey, I see you're like crinkling your forehead, like what's going on? But if I don't see their face, at the end of the day, like, did I even see this kid? Did I even say anything to this kid? So that's been my issue.
Yeah, and I think that that's on the top of everybody's mind, right? Is when we come, like, this is been such an explosion of creativity, right? And we've learned so much, but what has been the cost, right? And we've heard from many teachers in Puente classrooms across the state. Just our students are in slow-mo. We're in slow-mo. There's a lot less time. There's zero in person, and so it's been really tough, like you said, to be able to get the kind of rigor that we're really used to seeing in a Puente classroom. And so, you know, we're having a lot of time with, you know, students spending time just trying to get connected, right? You know, connectivity issues. And then by the time they get to their classroom, it's like, well, you know, and they're just struggling to get on. And, you know, it's just, yeah, definitely. I hear you. I hear you. That's real. And you know, I love the idea of the flipped classroom, so that, you know, when they come back, there's going to be both, right? It's like we're still going to be we'll be in person, and then maybe also have to do some of that guided practice through video too in the flipped classroom. So yeah, I see you're already thinking ahead, right? You're already thinking like 2021, right? Okay, so I like the different poetry formats and the blue and the I remember. Okay, we've seen that. It's still happening. The I remember with the Montes, and a lot of quick write opportunities using Google Classroom, and also encouraging students to respond to one another. We have each piece was relevant and authentic in the Padlet. Absolutely. You know, that gave students an opportunity to share their voice, well represented, even in the genres that you wouldn't expect, right? Even in argumentation, and we see that, and even in lit analysis, we see that, right? And then the writing's very deep and personal and reflective from Debbie's group. Yes. Okay, and then on the other side, does anybody feel like a burning need real quick before we go to the other side to talk about the K? Okay, so now here we go with the W. The W is a hard one. Okay, here's the W. All right, so all right, starting at the top with the yellow. One-on-one communication with students has been a struggle at times. Due to district restrictions, meeting with students to review writing has been a challenge. Absolutely. Finding time for conferencing, you know, we're lucky to first to get them there, right? And then to get them, you know, on board and getting, you know, what they need. But then, you know, it almost seems like, and then to go and do those kinds of conferences that we're probably used to in the regular classroom, so tough. So tough. And if anybody wants to unmute themselves and talk about, you know, how they tackle that problem or what solutions that they've come up with, that would be amazing. I'm sure everybody here would be interested in hearing a little bit about that. If you have some strategies that you can share, that would be awesome. The next on the top yellow, we have what is okay? Oh yeah, so, okay, what's essential? We're all asking ourselves that, right? Like what's okay to cut back on, how to maximize the time we have with our students. Again, we just don't have the time that we would have had in the classroom with because our students are, you know, as far as synchronous, right? 60 minutes in front of Zoom to get the kind of focus for those 60 minutes with their other classes that they're juggling, and all of the other issues that come along with technology in teaching this way. Yeah. What do we have to cut? What's essential? And so, you know, we want to keep making our classes relevant, you know, thinking about Zaretta Hammond, we want to keep, you know, that stickiness, right? We want to, you know, keep all that, but then how do we go to the next and make sure that all of our, you know, our standards are covered? What, you know, are we able to cover all the standards? Which ones are the most important? That is so tough in this new reality, in this new classroom. And then going back again, you know, to what you know, Jose was sharing is like, okay, but how are we getting them ready, right, for next year? And so
Melinda, may I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do we have access? It's so easy to record a classroom, right? Like a classroom session. Yeah. Do we have access? I mean, has anybody ever recorded like a whole 1 hour writing session for best practices and then share that video? It's so easy. I haven't recorded myself yet because I'm still winging it. I don't write anything down really. It's just like 3 bullets for a class, right? Yeah. But it's so easy to record class. I was wondering if there's like a best practice recording.
you know, when we were meeting this summer, we were talking about how amazing, you know, how this year it would be so important to have that library, you know, and we have not done that yet. But, you know, I think that, you know, you know, reminding us that we maybe need to put that at the top of the list, right? I know I've seen Giselle in front of the camera. Yes, maybe we need to get our spokesmodels in here to do some writing lessons, and we need to, you know, definitely share. If you have something, please send it our way. You know, we need those lessons, and I think the more of those that we can do, the better. And so you're challenging me, Jose, and you're saying, like, you know, we need to do that. And I agree. I think that, you know, I think the time is right for that. And, you know, things, the way things are going right now, this is going to be our reality for a while, maybe, you know. And so, yeah, let's do that. Let's make that happen. All right. Kids who do not turn cameras on are more likely to have D's and F's. Difficult because they disrupt. My district does not require cameras to be on. Okay, how do we make students make sure students are emotionally okay through screens, especially when it comes to writing about difficult and triggering topics? Yeah, you know, a lot tougher, you know, for our counselors to drop in sometimes too. You know, but I would definitely, you know, if you do know that you are getting to a triggering topic, definitely have your Fuente counselor in the room. Maybe Ade could, I don't know if she wants to contribute to that. But yeah, I mean, I know they're super busy and you know, they're having a hard time, you know, meeting the demands themselves in this reality. But yeah, definitely, it's tough because, you know, facial, you know, we can only see so much body language. We don't have those cameras on, you know, how can we gauge that? It's so tough. And then finding ways to give students space to be creative. Yes, and that's gonna be about today. So we'll be doing a little bit more of that. I'm excited about that sticky note. Okay, the next one is, how do we foster the deep personal relationships? Yes. Again, hopefully today we'll talk a little bit more about that, and we have some suggestions about that. So yes, those are big questions. And I think that was, like, you know, initially when we found out that we were going to be having these virtual classrooms, that was number one. You know, how are we going to make those connections? How is it possible? Is it possible? And I think that was a huge question. Okay, and let's see. We got making writing groups effective. Yes, super huge challenge. You know, anybody who has, you know, any thoughts about how those writing groups can be more effective? Oh yeah, yeah. Sometimes the kids are simply embarrassed to show us the reality in their home. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, freshmen are silent. Sophomores already have community. But we got, you know, so I think it's true. The folks that have the Fuente teachers that were able to loop for 10th grade, a lot stronger foundation to build on than the 9th grade teachers. So how do we figure how much time is reasonable for writing? Too much time, sessions seem less focused, not enough, it seems rushed. Again, yeah, that clock, what, you know, how we dial it back, how do we dial it up so it works for everybody? The 7th graders coming, oh yeah, 7th graders coming from 9 different feeder schools. Whew, many with IEPs and ELs, different curriculums given from the district school. Yeah. So for middle school, also, you know, yeah, it's just, they're you know, above and beyond, you know, teaching, you know, your positive phrases, right? And teaching those are, you know, argumentative issue strategies. We have so much going on, right? We have our students with IEPs. How are we hitting those students? How are we making sure that our ELs are, you know, getting what they need as well in our classrooms? And so, yeah, it's more complicated than ever. There's so many things going on. Let me see, what else do we got? Oh yeah, did we get all these? Did I miss any? I think we got them all. Okay. So yeah, a lot of challenges, and we have about 1 minute if anybody wants to chat about things that are going through their mind, just looking at these sticky notes and looking at your thoughts on this. Yeah. All right, I think we're going to move on then. All right, thank you for sharing. Thank you for going deep with that. I think that collectively we can all relate to each and every one of those sticky notes that are up there. So thank you for this conversation. I think this really came up in the sticky notes is, our students are traumatized, right? Communities are traumatized. We're traumatized ourselves, it's just been so hard. And so, how can we adjust our classrooms, right, in these times, so that we make sure that our students are thriving, right? That our students are creating, our students are engaged. And this article by Sean Ginwright came out during the summer, and it was about healing-centered engagement. And for me, this was a really important way to think about this year and frame this year. And it was really about, how can we create opportunities for our students to play, to reimagine, to design, and to envision. Going back, to the what you mentioned on the sticky notes, let's see, deep personal relationships, time to be creative, all of that. And so, this is really, really important in this time, is how are we going to, make learning sticky? How are we going to make learning relevant? How are we going to make learning fun for our cuentistas, while they're with us in the short amount of time that we do have them in our classrooms? And so when I was at a particular training this summer, I was able to see our guest speaker, Dr. Vijay Kanagala, talk about a project called the Cajita Project. And I was so excited to see his project and hear him talk about his project that he uses in his classroom, because I felt like it just hit all of this. It really, it spoke to this healing-centered engagement so deeply and profoundly. And it was so much about healing. It was about playing. It was about design, and it was about envisioning. And so I'm going to go ahead and introduce him real quick before we get into a little bit of sharing. And so Dr. Vijay Kanagala is here with us, and he's waving if you haven't met him yet. He's Associate Professor of Secondary and Higher Education and Coordinator of the Higher Education and Student Affairs Program in the School of Education and he's coming to us from Salem State University. So welcome, Dr. Kanagala.
Hello, everyone.
So we asked everybody to bring an object, and if you were not able, if you didn't get to all of that because you were so busy, I know with your students, maybe you didn't. But if you could think in your mind about an object that's special to you, and we're going to go ahead and write a little bit. What is it about that object that made you want to bring that object today? What's important, what's special with it, about it. So if you could go ahead and get back into your journals, we're going to take 5 minutes to write about the object. wondering if anybody wouldn't mind sharing. Perhaps you could unmute yourself and show us your object, or just talk about your object and what it means to you. Just going to spend a couple minutes sharing.
I'm willing to share.
Thank you.
I didn't even realize I had to do this, so I apologize.
Oh.
This is just one piece from my great-grandmother's Desert Rose China, like it's a cheap China, but a China collection. It was really, really popular, and it doesn't even have the lid. I think it's a little sugar piece, but my great-grandmother had it. My grandmother worked at the factory where they were made, so she had some pieces, and over time they got passed down to my mom, which it was never like a set. They were just random pieces, and we used them in everyday dishes and whatnot. And I really liked it because it felt like it was a piece of my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my mother, and I wanted a piece of that history too. So I happened to, my husband's from Northern California, and we happened to go into like a thrift shop, and we saw a box full of the pieces, plates, so little cutlery things, you name it. It was a bunch of different things, and I was so excited. It was $250, and I was like, oh, I want it, I want it. And for those of you who know anything about it, some of the pieces go for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars now. And I just got really lucky. I feel like it was fate that I came across that box, and they were all in really good condition. And I think they're all still from the original like 20 or 30 years that when they were first manufactured. So I don't care about it in a financial way. It's just my family, like we don't really have a lot in our family. We were always poor. So this to me feels like, it kind of makes me feel rich. Like this is something that even though it didn't necessarily belong physically to my family, it's still that memory of something that I saw constantly through generation after generation. And I wanted to keep that going.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing. What a beautiful story. I love that you just found it in that thrift store randomly. It's so much meaning.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more. Does anybody else, would anyone else like to share their object? This is fun.
I'll share.
Yay.
Took me a little while to find that button.
Yay.
And I just got out of class, but I did have my object. So what I have here is, it's a table runner, but it's one of many, many pieces of what would have been called, way back in the day, when women had their hope chest, where they would have to make all of their stuff that they were going to bring into their new home. So my great-grandmother made this by hand, along with, I have so many of these in my possession that have been passed down. So I'm now the 4th generation of women in my home, because my great-grandmother passed them to my grandmother, and my grandmother gave them to my mom, and my mom gave them to me. And it's kind of a lost art, and most of them I have put away because they're going on like 100 years old now. And they're made by hand, and I don't want anything to happen to them. And I wish I could do this, but I will place them out in areas where I know they're going to be safe. And it's just a reminder of the history of my family and what women had to, once upon what time we had to do. We didn't have a registry to go get things from Target. You had to make everything. And I have placemats, I have table runners, I have things that go under lamps. And many of you, if you've been in an old home with older women, you have these. And to me, they're just special, because this is something that's passed through 4 generations of hands and families. And the detail just blows my mind. It's just, with this one, you can't even tell the front from the back. It's crocheted. And then I've got a set of placemats where the thread is a much smaller thread, and it's batting. And it has a front and a back, but the detail is it's just crazy. And so it's just a part of my family and my history, and it's very old school. But that's part of me. I'm old fashioned and I love pretty lacy things. And so these are mostly in Ziploc bags now in the linen closet, but they are in special places in my home, and they're a part of my family history that I will pass on to my daughter, which will be 5 generations of women.
Wow. You brought such beautiful things. Thank you so much for sharing those stories and the history, and then, you know, just how it connects and how relevant it is to us today. And it's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Kanagala, who's going to tell you a little bit about the Cajita project. So maybe we could give him a quick welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. One second. Let me get to my. And I'm going to also save Anna the trouble of being the timekeeper. I'm going to start my time here so I don't go over, because I have a tendency to talk. This will save you the trouble, Anna. Again, thank you so much for having me, and I see a few faces that I met last time I was here. My name is, again, Vijay Kanagala. I use he/him pronouns, and I am at Salem State University, which is in Salem, Mass. Folks that have never been to the East Coast, if you think of the Witch City, the witches, the Salem witches, that's where I am. I'm about 2 miles away from the site. And this is also the ancestral land of the Nomkeg people. And so wanted to acknowledge that before I get into the presentation that I have. Thank you for sharing. We heard a couple of stories today. And I use something very similar in my classes, like how Melinda was mentioning. I work with graduate students who are in a program called Student Affairs in Higher Ed, the HESA program, Higher Education and Student Affairs, and these are students who want to work on college campuses, whether it is a 2-year or a 4-year institution, and want to serve students on campus, whether in res life positions or student leadership positions. But the idea is that they want to be of service to students, right? So that's the essential driving force. And I wanted to start by, I changed up a little bit as you were all sharing, because what you just shared was what is called guided imagery, right? And Dr. Norma Cantu, she's a professor of English at Trinity in San Antonio. And she uses what's called guided imagery in her classes. And I thought I'll start off by letting you listen to her for a minute.
I guess the writing, whenever we work with writing, we're really working with spiritual things. And before I even wrote Canicula, I used to have an exercise for my students to remember a photograph of themselves as children and write about it. And I'm teaching description and commas, sentence combining and all this stuff. But I have them do these guided imagery exercises, and they write. And one student was writing it, and it gets very emotional because it's about themselves and their families and all that. But I guide them. We start with things that are more innocuous until we get to something that's more personal. And they wrote it and went home. They take it home. They read it in their small groups. They take it home, revise, edit, and then turn it in for me to grade. And this one student came back, and her eyes were And she said, I cried all night. She says, you have helped me to know my mother. How? I had asked them to write it. She went and the picture she remembered was of her mom and she with her kids, her siblings, all huddled around her mother. And so she wrote about that picture, and then she started talking to the mother. And so no durmió. She was up working on that paper all night and came back the next morning and told me this and was so grateful. I can't say that I can't take credit and say I did it. I allowed it to happen. And those are the kinds of moments. I mean, this is just one example of how something worked.
So this is kind of like what we just did, right? Like you brought an object and you used it to draw some inspiration and write. And part of what that happens, part of the process is that it evokes emotion. It allows for that emotional energy to come in. And so when you're working with your students, you also should be in a place of reception. You know, you should be able to understand how to do this. And so for you to engage today, just a sampler, right? So when Mary, you were talking about the lace, now you're talking about generations, right? And part of what that also means is, what was your great grandmother thinking when she was putting it together, right? Did she imagine that this was going to be sent to 3 generations or 5 generations after, right? And same thing with the China, right? Now, so these are emotions that come through. And so once you've experienced that, you're in a place to understand where the students might also be, right? And so part of this is you should also have that training to do this, and the Cajitas project allows you to do that. How do I enter this work? And this is important because the way that you just entered the space, I enter the classroom space with my students where I tell them who I am. And this is something that I worked on. This is part of a mandala that I created for class. And I'm giving you 3 different options here. So one is the guided imagery. One is the mandala. Mandala comes from a Buddhist tradition. And in this case, what I tell students is, my family immigrated from India. And so as part of this work, I wanted to understand, you may not believe it, but each of those grains over there actually represent the people that have supported me up until that point in my life. I actually, took the time and as part of the tradition, it's meditation, right? So you actually go back and think of the people that literally helped you. And so that's the way I want to enter the work. And part of what I tell my students is the backgrounds that I hold, the social identities that I hold are important, right? And how do I share that with the student becomes a key part of my trust building with the students, and their ability to actually then take that and then write and engage with me in the classroom space. Earlier you all were talking about with COVID, how do we trust our students? How do we make sure that they're successful? There's so much, the ethic of care was so evident, right? But there's also this thing of how do I know if they're doing the right things, right? And so how do we then set those things up? And especially with the Ponte project, where you are working with students who are who need support with their writing, and now you take an interdisciplinary approach with the writing, counseling, and mentoring components, and especially through building community, right? And that's a big part of who and what this project is about. Moving to the Cajitas project, this was actually a project that Dr. Alberto Pulido, he's a ethnic studies professor at the University of San Diego. He called it the Cajitas assignment. And now this is an article that I shared with Melinda, and I know that you all have a copy of this. He started this in ethnic studies, and what he did was he wanted students to engage with their ethnic identity. And he was working with mostly Chicano students, Chicanx students, right? And so he framed it in a way so that students were able to engage with their cultural identity and the ethnic identity and bring it into the classroom space. And my mentor, when I was in grad school getting my doctorate, she had interviewed him for her book, which is, this is the book. I don't think you can see through it, but it's called Senti Pensante Pedagogy, Sensing Thinking Pedagogy, Teaching for Wholeness, Social Justice, and Liberation. And I'll write it in the chat for you in a second. But this is when she was interviewed, she interviewed about 16 different teachers and faculty across the country that used different ways to engage with students coming from different backgrounds. And so when she wrote the book, I was a doctoral student. I was helping her with the project, the writing project, and she offered to teach a course and then asked me to be a TA. And as part of that process, I had never done a cajita. I'd never crafted a cajita before. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do as a TA when I hadn't done it myself. And she said, well, you've read about it, and this is the opportunity for you to do it. And so, in the article that I shared 2 articles. The second one is the one that I wrote with Laura Rendon, who's my mentor. And in that, I share how I came to be in relationship to my cajita, right? What was it for me? And I mentioned earlier that my family immigrated from India. And if you read through this little reflection, you'll realize that I literally took and threw away the suitcase that my family had immigrated from India, right? So I had to, my mom, long story short, my mom had me dumpster dive and pick it up and bring it back into the house. And that ends up becoming my cajita, if you will, right? And so when I think about writing, and the reflection that I had as part of the process was that a simple thing like a simple thing like a spring cleaning project in our home ended up becoming a valuable doctoral life-altering project in a way that became part of my pedagogy. So this is a suitcase. I actually have it right behind me here. I'll spare you the trouble of lifting it up, but this is the cajita, and it has all of the artifacts. You see the little book there. That's the first book that my dad bought me 40 years ago as a kid. There are different things. You see the $20 bill there. That's the first time that my mom made some money babysitting in the U.S. and she had gave it to me. Right. So there are artifacts in there that I started collecting over the years that I had that had value and meaning for me that ended up becoming part of my cajita. In this article that I talk about, and in this I share kind of like the process of putting together a cajita, the emotions that people might go through. Oftentimes I use this as part of my final assignment for class in my intro to the graduate program, introductory course. And oftentimes students are like, by the time they leave your classrooms and the time they come to my classrooms, our education system destroys creativity in some ways. And so they get stuck with the idea of like, what do you mean we have to do an art project for class? I came to graduate school for to get a credential, and you're asking me to do this silly project, right? And that's the usual way of thinking. But what ends up happening is it becomes transformational as I engage with them throughout the semester. And oftentimes they ask questions about, because caja is a box in Spanish, and cajita is a sacred box. And so the way that Alberto Pulido thinks about this is, how do you capture who you are, the sacredness of who you are, using this project, right? And so so I'll let him speak to you. This is a couple of minutes.
So this box here was done by a student named Valerie Parra, And the title you can see on the top sheet. I usually ask students to write like a narrative, which the students here today did a great job in. And it's called My Life as a Mestiza, Valerie Parra. And the little that I know about it, the discussions that we had about it, was that she considers herself part Chicana and part Apache. And so when you look at the imagery in terms of the symbols, you see some of the traditional symbols that you would see in terms of being Mexicana or Chicana and that whole process. But then you see some of the Native American influence. And she did all these kind of different symbols around here. You can see, you know, Christian symbols and Native American symbols. Up on top, which you can't get access to, there's an actual field of an agricultural field. There's an eagle that's been carved in. There's a horse. There's some Native American symbols as well. And I think it just captures what the students were talking about in terms of those dualities and living in those multiple worlds.
I think that earlier in the chat, you know, I'm forgetting the name now, but somebody had mentioned the reality of students. You know, the reason why people, you know, students don't turn on the cameras, right, is that they don't want to show us the reality of their lives, and so if you think about the Cajitas project as them offering a glimpse of who they are and their lives and their stories, just beyond anything that you know that you might be able to actually capture. And I think there was a comment earlier about how do we create authentic relationships with our students, and this project is one of those opportunities that I've had where students go back to it again and again. And now, just to give you a quick, I'll take about another minute. When you think about the Cajitas project, just as a teacher, it becomes a pedagogical tool for you to engage with issues of social justice or activism, community building. You know, whatever the focus of your course might be, you know, you can use that. It also allows you to recenter education and make it more relevant by offering counter narratives and resistance, because oftentimes education, whether it's K through 12 or higher ed, has a very dominant Western-centric / white-centered ways of understanding. And this project allows students to kind of like lean into their own wisdom, cultural wisdom, ancestral wisdom that they can bring to the classroom. It allows for contemplation and develop a philosophy, if you will. I know these are young folks, but they can still have a philosophy at that age, and you know, giving them time to reflect and think about, you know, what does it mean for you to have a piece of grandma's whatever, right, or grandpa's, or ancestral you know, artifacts, or histories, right? People have histories that get passed on, oral histories. It's also an opportunity for you and the student to kind of like think about life and educational experiences so that they can have hope and resilience and opportunity. And what does it mean to go through, you know, K through 12 and then get to college? And because that's the goal of the Puente project, right? And to also use this assignment as a way for students to heal and understand the challenges that they are going to surpass. These are a couple of cajitas that I've used, you know, that students in my classes have created. This is the smallest cajita. It's a matchbox, you know, cajita de ceria, right? There's a student who is a minimalist, is very, very careful about, you know, she's very, very environmentally conscious of everything. And so she created this, and I don't think there's a picture of that, but actually inside the box and around the edges, she has artifacts, you know, photos and images within it. These are, again, other artifacts that other cajitas that students have created. The one on the left is of a mentor of mine who actually brought me into this field. She ended up taking a course that I was teaching. She was getting a master's at that time. And behind the flag, she's Puerto Rican, and behind the flag is her brother who passed away. And she had never, she wasn't able to offer a flower, a paid respects, and apparently he loved the hibiscus. And so as part of a cajita, this was her first time that she offered. She ended up creating artwork to offer this to her brother. Again, more cajitas. The one on the top that says insects is of a student that is a DACA student, and talks about what does it mean to actually go through that journey, right? So I'll stop there. I think I have some reflections on how students have have once they finish the project, they also have to write about it. For me, I asked them to speak about the emotions that they went through putting it together. It becomes very personal. I hear stories that they probably have never had a chance to talk about before, and this is from Salem State. This is a student who ended up was working on the Cajitas project, and this was last year, right before Thanksgiving. He ended up sharing a letter and slipping it in my office. So I'll stop here, and then we'll probably have a few questions and engage in a conversation.
Is it okay if I share?
Sure.
something? Oh, Dr. Kanagala. So I just wanted to share, I had the opportunity to be at the last training and the last conference. And a couple days later, I was going into my computer room with every intention of cleaning it and organizing and creating this clutter-free space. And Cajeta was just pretty much landed in my lap. And it was postmarked November 12th, 2013. I'm not an especially sentimental person, but I think I just immediately thought of you. And I opened it up, and it was the last gift from my Aunt Chi, who had passed away a year later. And in it had my Paddington bear that I was given at adoption. It had Judy Blume's "Are You There, God? Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret." It had pictures of my grandmother, who was Cherokee heritage. And she needed to, and because of her job at McDonnell Douglas, she was a Rosie the Riveter. They had her dress in a headdress, and it was appropriation at its worst. And she had notes about how she felt about it. I had remnants of her stamp collection, and all these things. And so I got to write. I started writing. And so I had my pre-write for today. And the other thing I found was what made me a writer when I was in 2nd grade, poetry by Becky. And it's just this cheesy, I typed it. I learned to type in this old school typewriter at 8 years old. And it was I entered a poetry contest. And that's when I fell in love with writing. So it's such a sentimental journey. And it just had me writing and reflecting. And my computer room is still cluttered and has not been cleaned yet, but I feel that decluttering that it was just such a, like you said, kind of a healing and just freeing. And I didn't know I was carrying anything, but it was sentimental, and it made me feel good, and just made me a little bit of sadness because it was my aunt's final gift. But I appreciated it so much, and I cannot wait to use this with my students, and in particular my ELD students. They teach ELD, so I can't wait to implement this project.
Thank you so much for sharing. That's so powerful to hear in real time the impact that it might have on someone, right? It's always nice to hear that. It actually, I have students who and I was mentioning this last time, I'm actually working with a student right now who I worked with 7 years ago, and he's starting his application for his doctoral program. Like, he's applying for grad school again. And he starts by talking about his cajita, right? He's talking about his grandfather's backpack going through the Great Depression, and what it meant for his family to have survived that. And now, for him to be able to be in college and work on a college campus, right? So they become very powerful stories. Do you have anybody have any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
With the kids being home, do you think they would have enough things around the house to be able to construct this? Because, you know, I know when I've done things like this at school, I've had to kind of supplement and help the kids out. And I don't know what kind of situation they're in at home and how much they can put together.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that so for me, when I put my cajita together, it was all the things that I had, right? I didn't have to go buy anything or, you know, do that. But I've also realized that sometimes people don't have a lot of stuff. You know, like my mom, I tease her that she's a closet, you know, she hoards stuff, right? And she's always keeping stuff, and she's an Asian immigrant mother. And the things that, you know, she will always say that it's going to come handy, you know, 20 years from now, and she'll still keep it, right? And they actually do come handy. And then she'll say, I told you so, right? But when you think about students, you could keep it as simple or as complex, right, as you want. I have a student who was a Syrian refugee, international student, who ended up bringing everything that he had to class because he didn't have a lot. But whatever he had, he brought to class to represent and show that this is all that I have. And this was also when, you know, we had the travel ban, you know, happen a couple of years ago or 4 years ago. And so you can keep it as simple. And again, you can also encourage them not to go buy things and not to make it more materialistic, right? Use what you have, be creative. And one thing that I hear from students is they might start the project thinking they don't have anything, and then one thing will lead them to think of something else. And then they start going through, you know, old stuff, and, you know, their old journals, or they have photos stashed away somewhere. Or it could be a digital. I have students who've done digital projects. It doesn't have to be, you know, I mean, in some ways I think we used to, you know, the term old school, right? I want to touch and feel stuff. And then a couple of years ago, students started putting things in the digital format, right? Like for me, I still go print my photos. And then I have students now like, hey, can I show this on my iPhone or my, you know, whatever phone? And then that becomes a digital cajita, if you will.
That kind of leads to my question, which is I noticed that in the classes that you and the others that you refer to, it's a display at the end, and everybody's is out there, and you do a gallery walk, and everybody looks at them, not touching, but looking, possibly asking questions if they're appropriate and so forth. I was trying to figure out how, when our kids won't even turn on their cameras, how are we going to get them to share these most personal things? And then how are we going to logistically make it work?
Great question. I think there are some, the way that I've done this, I have had, now even when I've done this in person, there are some students who, they have an option not to do this project because it can be, one, triggering for them. It could be very emotional, and, you know, or two, they're not comfortable. They just don't want to be vulnerable about it with other folks, right? So students do have the option to step out of it and not do the project, and I assign them something else. But when we do this in person, what I've told students is, if I am going to, you know, if the intent is for us to build community, and if all of us want to share, how would you feel if I decided, and now in the moment, that, okay, you know what, I just don't want to, I don't feel like sharing today. What does that do to building trust within the group? And that has happened a couple of times. And I had a student, this was again 6 or 7 years ago, and a student decided not to present. He ended up writing, you know, this is a graduate student, as part of his thesis, ended up writing the damage that he did by not presenting that one day, right? 2 years later, the reflection was still happening. And he apologized. He ended up actually convening the class again and then presenting to them at that moment. That may not be, you know, that may not necessarily happen with this, you know, with this younger crowd, you know, a group of students. So part of what I might suggest is, if there's a way for you to start building that sense of community little by little, gradually telling them the value of the project, and if they're able to buy into it, then you'll have less of resistance, because now they're sharing about each other. They're sharing about their families, and it's less about content. It's less about a textbook. It's less about something else. It's about, if I want to know about Jose, I am going to listen to what Jose is going to say, right? And so maybe set it up that way, and that'll give students the option to say, you know what, I want to be part of this. I see a question. How can this be a way into the community leadership paper? Is this an opportunity to create a cajita that shows the experience and juxtapose it to social issues? Can a cajita be created that is symbolic of a community social issue? Yes, and no, I can share, if you look up Alberto Pulido's work, now San Diego, he works with the community there. I'm forgetting the name of the project that he works with right now, but he does a huge art project in the community. And something that I've done one time that I've done this was, what does it mean for a group of students to come together to create one cajita? Right, rather than have separate cajitas. So that was only one time that the group was really, really close to each other. And the Cajita project brought them to that space. They trusted each other enough to say, we want to create that. Unfortunately, they told us, it was that one group that said they didn't want a picture of it taken because it was such a special project that they just wanted it for themselves. So yeah, so to me, and again, when you're thinking about, I'll let Melinda speak to the leadership paper. But I think it is possible. It is very possible.
Yes, and actually Melinda is going to present on that a little bit later. But I want to thank you so much, Mr. Kanagala, from the bottom of all of our hearts. Thank you so much for your time, your knowledge, and your wisdom today. We always talk about, kind of these, healing and transformative pieces for our students. And of course, now more than ever, this is just perfect, timing for them to kind of do this kind of work. And honestly, I mean, Melinda will share a little bit about her experience later, but just my experience with the cajita too, like I said, is just, and I think you mentioned before that for your students, you saw that like it healed wounds that they didn't even know existed, right? And that's kind of what, Rebecca was talking about earlier. Like she didn't know, you even have that wound, and once you just start finding all these other things, and it's this very, healing and wonderful process. So thank you again for your time. As always, you guys will have a copy of this and, all of the work that he sent. So, and all his information, so you can reach out if you need to. But thank you again, Dr. Kanagala, for your time.
Thank you. I dropped my email there. If you have any questions, I'm happy to, respond and chat or whatever we need to do.
Perfect. Thank you.
And thank
yes,
you
I see it in the chat. Okay, so like I said, thank you. So now we're going to just kind of take a second on this movement of uplifting and being positive. We want you to add in the chat really quick a quote or a song lyric that's kind of been getting you through this school year so far. I'm just going to share before the chat gets flooded. But I'm just going to share with you. We were talking and kind of joking about it earlier. If you're not on TikTok, you won't really understand, but Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, it's kind of like this big, TikTok thing that happened. I want to say now it's been 2 weeks ago, of a man who was like, something happened to his car, broke down, and he just decided to take, I think, his longboard, which is like a skateboard, to work. And he played this song, and it became like this huge kind of viral, hit. But ever since then, I just listened to the song, and it's just really brought so much joy and happiness, just a small thing. So that's my song, Fleetwood Mac. Let me see. I don't know where the chat, let me look in the chat really quick. I don't know if I can. Oh, thank you, Anna. She's playing the song. Yes, if you have not seen it, look it up. You can just like Google it now. He's super famous. He's like bought a house, and actually I seen that recently he's been like giving money back to charity and investing in his community. So it's just been just kind of this really fun and exciting kind of experience. Let's see. Carla, thank you. Of course, Finding Nemo with the middle schoolers, right? Just keep swimming. Of course, this is a mantra that was amazing back when it came out, but now it's just like so true, right? It's hard for them sometimes, but we have to keep encouraging them. Thank you, Lupe. It says, be soft. Do not let the world make you hard. Do not let pain make you hate. Do not let bitterness steal your sweetness. I love that. Thank you. Washma here says, I wonder what teachers make. Difference, peppermint patty, they make a difference. It's cute. Debbie, and the beat goes on. Yes, that's a good one. Mary, you will be found. Yes, from Dear Evan. It's a nice reminder of the power of someone's words and voice, and that you are never alone, that students have a place to be found and to be heard. Yes. Okay, then says, God help keep my head above water. It's Avril Lavigne. Okay, so yes, on this note, just with like the just kind of quotes and like I said, moving forward, it's my honor to introduce to you Miss Rebecca Bell. She is the Puente teacher at Winton Middle School in Hayward, California. And she's going to kind of talk to you about how she walked her students through the digital portfolio in the spring, in the height of school closures and the craziness. So let me see, where is she? It's hard for me to see her right now, but if Rebecca, you want to unmute yourself, and thank you again for being here with us today.
Hi, thanks so much for inviting me. I was telling Giselle, I always feel like a tiny tree in a redwood forest with all the great talent of teachers and educators that we have here. So thank you. So the digital portfolio, it was actually born out of necessity. You know, especially, I know for seniors in high school, they probably had the worst of it, but when you're an 8th grader, you know, your world is just relevant to what's going on where you are. And you see Santa Cruz field trips were canceled, graduations canceled, all these things, COVID, they're scared over COVID. So all these things going on. And we knew that we had to reinvent the portfolio ceremony. Usually what happens for our ceremony is families are invited to a big event. The students collect certificates, there's dancing, there's music. It's a huge celebration. So we needed to find a way. We knew we couldn't replace it, but we needed to find a way to make a virtual ceremony. And Ms. Jones pulled out all the stops during drive-through graduation. Our Puentistas got medallions and certificates and stickers and Starbucks cards and just all these things to make it as special as possible. And then when it came time for the virtual ceremony, the question was, how do we create a virtual ceremony so we can showcase student work? And as I sat looking at Google Doc after Google Doc, realizing that people aren't going to have time to read this, I saw Jordana Henry's COVID diaries. And so that's what inspired the digital portfolio. And so I'll just walk you through one of our students' portfolios. And what happened for the portfolio ceremony is I asked each student to choose 3 slides from their portfolio to add into a master portfolio so we could showcase a little bit of each student's work. So it was the equivalent of a gallery walk. And so here we have little Alex Sanchez and his inspirational quote. So we have, for him, it was learn from yesterday, live for today, and hope for tomorrow. And so just something a quote that was, I asked them to choose a quote that's relevant to where they are in this space and time. 3 words. We always want students to kind of synthesize experiences and information. and just this 3 words to describe how you feel. And one of the things Alex did is he tiered it according to the way the school year went. Great, and then it was unexpected, and then it was sad. We have the dedication piece, of course. So in Alex's case, he dedicated it to his family. His family is very close-knit. Alex is a very, very quiet, reflective young man. And so writing and the digital portfolio was a great platform, especially for him. This is the only, I was pretty soft on the grading for obvious reason. The only piece of the portfolio I had a rubric for the digital portfolio was this reflection. Did you capture who you are as a writer? How have you grown? How did you feel about some of the things you read? So in Alex's, he dug deep into his reflection, and he really focused on his writing piece. More pictures. We always, in our portfolios, when we are live and on the ground, you know, we always want to keep the wonder and enchantment of learning. And many times, any way you can incorporate art and music or other mediums that give them the creative outlet, it's really important. So since we couldn't do the glitter and the pictures and all the other accoutrements, we decked out our digital portfolios with as many pictures as possible. And so there, and of course, the essential question for everyone, what is COVID-19? How has it impacted your life? And how will it impact you in the future? So, and of course, obviously promotion, 8th grade promotion was a big deal for them, but just missing their friends. This was taken, I asked them to choose a favorite piece or a favorite strong line from their writing, and we had a couple informational essays, but one of them was on inspiring Latinos, Latinx, and his was Roberto Clemente. So, and he didn't take his strong line. The goal was to choose your own strong line, but he did quote Roberto Clemente here, and I thought it was pretty powerful. 3 books you read. So they also, of course, they had various independent reading projects. I think a lot of what I've learned about independent reading projects came from Sharon King. So I try to implement as much independent reading as possible and make it interesting. And these were Alex's 3 choices. And I gotta tell you, it was interesting because The Absolute True Diary of a Part-Time Indian was on almost every student's slide. They connect with the book. This piece was pulled, a lot of them pulled this from their argumentative essay and community leadership essays. And so what the question on the slide, there was a template and the question asks, it says, si se pueda, what is important to you? What are you passionate about? What are you going to advocate for now and in the future? And for Alex, it was immigration and an end to racism. Some students wrote about mental illness, mental health issues, LGBTQ, Black Lives Matter. It really ran the gamut, but I will say, I think immigration was the most widely cited for the argumentative essay and in our slides. And it was, and especially the past few years, that's been weighing on their minds. So this provided them an outlet to talk about things that concern them, as well as ways, something that they're passionate about and they want to be advocates for. Okay, I think we're coming up on the end here, a little more of Alex. And then we ended the portfolio with a vision for your future. What do you see? Right now, we're in this very weird space, and life feels uncomfortable, sometimes sad, sometimes disappointing, sometimes uplifting and full of hope. So what is your vision for the future? And he sees it being full of joy and fun, and for that, and a lot of students have a lot of hope for the future. So that made me feel really good. Okay, thank you.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you, Rebecca, but I know we went by quickly, but as always in True Pointe Fashion, you know, you will have a copy of her template, which is here. I will email it to you separately, but it also is here. So it has Rebecca's template, which has what you give to your students, right? So they know where to list the 3 words, where to put the dedication, just kind of copy and paste. I just wanted to let you know that because I saw a couple like questions. And so we're going to hold our questions for Rebecca to the end. And I get to once again introduce my wonderful colleague, Miss Melinda Martinez. You already know her. She's a teacher training coordinator for the high school. I absolutely adore her. And she has an amazing project to share with you today, kind of a combo. So I'm going to let her take it over.
Thanks, Giselle. Wow, that was an intro. Thank you. So this is just, you know, ripping off all of the ideas that have been presented, coming from the quarantine journals, coming from the Cajita project, coming from Rebecca's digital portfolio, and this is just kind of putting the pieces all together. And so, you know, you might think about your students and where on the continuum that you would want to go with them, and maybe it's, you know, you're leaning more towards, you know, having a Cajita project, you know, and it's that is a piece to frame the class, or maybe you want to go and attach more writing to it. When I first saw VJ, I thought that it was really great because it was such a great hook, cognitive hook into which to place all of our writing genres. And so that's what I was thinking when I saw the Cajita project originally is, what if we framed our writing about everything that is relevant and important to us that we've had put into our own Cajita. And so I went ahead and I started making my own. This is mine, and I used Rebecca. I took Rebecca's template literally, and I just started dropping things in. And so, I dropped in the picture, I dropped in my little dedication, all of those pieces. I dropped in, you know, my, what I was thinking about COVID. It happened to be a poem. I dropped in as poetic expression. I attached all of my writing onto each of the pages of my Cajita project. I wrote notes about the things that I was discovering. Oh my God, if you get a chance to do this on your own before you do this with your students, you'll just have some mind-blowing moments, you know, just, you know, and kind of Giselle was with me when I was going through this experience of writing and putting the Cajita together. And it was just like, you know, kind of like, you know, finding the box Rebecca, you know, like just going and just discovering so many things. And I think your students will be so engaged, and you'll be engaged if you do a practice one for your students. So the community leadership, I think, is the most important piece that we had a question about earlier in the chat. And so I wanted to talk about that real quick. I did take the community leadership paper to write my paper. And so my paper is number 2. I looked at the second prompt, which is, you know, leaders in a community, describe your community. What is a community that you're concerned about? Show an understanding. Why is it important? What is your personal connection? What are some leaders? What are their characteristics? And how did you become involved in this community? So when I was looking at my project, I was really thinking about, you know, these things that I put in, you know, by project, which are important to me. You know, I enjoy the outdoors. I enjoy, you know, camping with my family. I enjoy recipes and old school. I love vintage stuff. I'm with you ladies on the vintage stuff. And so like I have these old cookbooks and I put one of them in there, and it got me really thinking about, you know, just my, you know, an issue that I was really concerned about. And so, so it was something that, an item in my box that actually connected me to my community issue. And so, so in the paper, you know, I started talking about, you know, where I'm living right now is the territory of the Tongva, you know, what's happening with all of the wildfires right now, and just how it's made our air just so horrible, and what, you know, it means to me on a personal level. You know, we've been stuck indoors. We've had our, you know, our air purifier, like half of our talk at our office is like, well, what air purifier are you going to buy? You know, and so, you know, what can we do about it on a personal level? What can I do about it, you know, with my family? And so I have about 1 minute. So I'm just gonna, maybe we could just go back to the rest of it. Yeah, I attached in my literary analysis, more notes. I put in my argumentative, and basically I just tried to, again, these were, issues that were important to me. Things that had been happening. My family's from New Mexico. I had a lot of things in there from, my family. And, one thing that happened is there was a statue of Oñate that was taken down over the summer because of George Floyd. And, my argument was really about like how, what about those monuments, how, what was my stance on those monuments, things that we had passed going to visit my grandmother, on those roads, and what it meant, and, what it meant to my family, what it meant to, and talk about your emotional scars. But again, these things are very, it will bring up things that are very unexpected. And definitely, there's a lot of emotion that goes into this when you start digging into these things that are really personal and important to you. So I think all of the comments that were brought up earlier about having a safe space to share these, and about, things that will happen when you dive into the writing and the creating, because it is so relevant, it is so personal. But again, such a great opportunity to explore so many genres. I felt like I could have gone in a lot deeper with my research. I just kind of hit the surface. I made this in maybe 3 or 4 days, but it could have. It's something that definitely it will stay with me for life. I will go back and research these things and have interest in these things because of what it brought up as I was creating my cajita. So.
And I just wanted to point out just how incredibly organized and beautiful this was. So Melinda put it in here, like for your students, everything that you just saw, the full version of all her papers that she wrote, and all of her pictures are in one file, right, on the first slide. So like if you were a teacher grading this, you could see all of your students' pictures. So every picture, individual picture she has in her cajita is all in one area, right? And she linked, you can see if you wanted to grade her paper, not saying that we're going to grade it, Melinda, don't get nervous. But we're not going to grade it. Even though I know this took the place of are you scoring? Are we going to score? Don't worry, we're not going to score your portfolio, Melinda. But yes, so it's all organized like you saw. So this link here on the very first, of her PowerPoint, of her Google slide, links you to everything in her portfolio. So I just thought that was just genius, beautifully, beautifully done. Thank you so much, Melinda. So now I think we're gonna move on to, do you wanna take questions now, or do we wanna move to L+?
Is there any quick questions before we wrap?
Questions for Melinda or for Rebecca? No?
Melinda, where's the document that has your community leadership prompts?
It's embedded in the PowerPoint. So if you looked like at her, and once again, you will get this PowerPoint plus all of the links, right? We'll have a big folder for you, but it is on her actual community leadership. If you look on the slide itself, it is here. It's underlined in like the light blue. If you click on it, it will take you straight to the prompt. And like I said, you'll have access to all of this as always. And I believe you did do a couple of edits, right, Melinda, for this one? So
no, that's the original. That's the.
Oh, this is the original one. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
And then Melinda chose
really familiar. Yeah.
Number 2. Yeah. So it's in here. It's embedded into the actual PowerPoint slide. I mean,
is it on the Puente teacher site? The PowerPoint?
It will be.
Not yet. We haven't put it up yet. We're going to put this up as soon as this is over.
Got it. Sorry.
No worries. We'll put it up. Don't worry. We always, and we'll send an email specifically kind of summarizing this event that will have direct links to these things. That way you don't have to go like scavenging around to find it. It will all be in this pretty, package. But yeah, it's a very good question. Anything else? It's hard for me to see everybody at once. Let me stretch this out a little bit. Okay. So then let's get into the fun L+. So our L is going to be, what were some key takeaways from today's training? Our plus is going to be, what do you need to feel more confident, or as confident as possible? We know it's not like we're all super confident, right? But as a distance learning writing teacher. So we're going to give you a couple minutes. If you have the link, or I think Anna's going to put it back in the chat for you, to go to the Springboard. Let me go back really quick. Sorry. If we go back to the Springboard, then you'll see that you can go on to the second page now, and you can add anything. Once again, just click on the left icon. It looks kind of like a square with 2 lines. It's a sticky note. You can just add your little comments here in the L and the plus. We're going to give ourselves, what would you say, Melinda, maybe 4 minutes for this? And then we'll give you some updates.
Giselle, you're muted. Yeah, we go. Is there a link that I'm supposed to click on?
You should have already, it's the same link as earlier. So if you don't have it up, if you closed it up, then Anna put it in the chat just now.
Okay, because I joined a little late because I was still doing my attendance.
No worries. So it's in the chat now. Do you see it?
I see it. Yes.
Yeah, and then some people earlier were having some issues actually adding. So I think if you just refresh once you open it up, then it should let you add the little sticky note over here. You just click on it, pick your color, and type in your comment, and then it will go.
There we go. Thank you.
Sure.
Melinda, would it be okay if I share something?
Yes, go ahead, Jeannie.
So we have our Puente Club meetings on Tuesdays at lunch, and my daughter, she's a 10th grade Puentista, and she's overheard me talking with my students and some of the challenges and whatnot of this virtual world. And she's like, Mom, I'll run your club meeting for you. I'll come up with some ideas and I'll do it. And so she did. She created kind of something like this where the kids wrote what they were thankful for, and they also did a game where it was kind of like poll questions, but she didn't know exactly how to set up a poll, but they still managed to do it in the chat. And she asked them all kinds of questions about like their favorite things to do during Thanksgiving, and do they eat traditional food or do they eat something else, and do they watch football? I mean, she just came up with all kinds of great ideas, and the kids said it was one of their favorite club meetings so far. So we're looking to see if one of our 9th grade Puentistas, because they're our original group, would like to work with my daughter and help run clubs. Since we can do it virtually now, we can incorporate the high schoolers with us as well.
Love that idea.
I love it. I was going to say too, I love that idea. Actually, that's one of the pluses. I see someone put finding ways to interact virtually with other Puente classes, right? And I love that that's even like, I think that that question or whoever put that comment probably means like, you know, high school, middle school, but it's amazing that that's a high school to your middle school students, right? Like across even, you know, schools. And we do have some opportunities coming up, and we'll talk a little bit about that next, but that is so smart, using, you know, your resources in your home, literally, right? Literally, your daughter in your home.
But we also asked her, like, what advice would you give the kids right now virtually? What would benefit them? And she came up with some great answers. I was like turning and looking at her going, are you my daughter? I was impressed. So I just wanted to share that.
That's awesome. If you can get a proud mama moment out of it, even better. I love that. Love that.
Can I address one of the stickies real quick?
Oh yeah, I was gonna do it, but go ahead.
Okay, there's one that I really wanted to talk about because I think it's coming up a couple times, and I just really wanted to share something that Yvonne Valdez, some of you might be familiar with this teacher extraordinaire from Puente that teaches at Tennyson High School. She's been doing this for a number of years, and one thing that she has struggled with is some of the questions that are on here, like asked about you know, being able to give enough feedback in a timely manner. And the way that she does it is that she teaches the lesson and then she comes back the next day. And this is like the next day after the lesson is taught. And she goes over, you know, 3 different parts. 1, did you hit the standard? Did you go above it? Are you like below it, right? And so she, so are you, you know, far below? So for each of those, she gives advice, recommendations for the next step. And so always part of the next day's meeting is actually giving that feedback verbally. And so it saves her a lot of time actually writing all of those comments. And so she found herself, you know, writing the same comments because, you know, the students were making similar mistakes at the different levels. And so she has that way of reinforcing the lesson, having an example of how to level up, and also then giving the students a chance to reflect on that. What would they do to level up for the next one? And I just wanted to mention that because I think it's a really brilliant strategy when we don't really have enough time to give feedback and repeat the same thing on every paper. So I just want to mention that real quick.
Yeah, I actually have a clipboard, like a digital clipboard of comments that I have, because it's the same thing. I'll just copy, paste, and then I'll create a whole lesson out of all those clipboard comments saying, okay, these are the things I'm seeing. This is how we deal with this. But it's still not just my Puente kids, but it's, you know, there's 5 other classes. It's a lot.
Yeah. And speaking of that, on another sticky, it says patience, right? Please be kind and patient to yourself. I know we've been telling you this all year, but please, right? And I think I talked about this with my counselors last week or 2 weeks ago when I saw them, but it's so hard. It's so easy, right, for us to teach and talk to students about patience and kindness, but it's hard for us to do it for ourselves, right? So make sure you're just patient with yourself. We definitely are going to some of the other pluses. You know, it says finding other engagement community, building ideas, right, that we can do virtually. You know, we try to share as much as we can with you, right? If we find something good, we always add in like a newsletter for you and so on and so forth. So you're getting communications from us about those things. So anything that we see, or if you see something that you're like, oh my goodness, this worked so well with my class, as you know, just send it to us and then we'll make sure that everybody gets it, right? If you're like, wow, this is such a good tool. I think someone shared last time when we had this training earlier this month, I think it was Sharon King, right? That shared the No Red Ink, right? She said she found a feature in the No Red Ink that, you know, that is still part of the free No Red Ink, you know, think that really has helped her with, you know, grading students and guiding students through writing. So little tidbits like that. If you come across something, just send it to Melinda or myself so that we can include that like in the next, you know, teacher newsletter, so that we, you know, can share those best practices as well. And we kind of skipped over the L, so I just want to go back to the L a little bit, just like one, and then, you know, I'll just go over some kind of upcoming events and then we'll be done. So obviously the Cajita project looks like everyone liked it, definitely good. What I really liked about the Cajita, and maybe I'm biased, maybe because my kids are, you know, my students, my age group is a little bit younger, you know, the middle schoolers, but I do really like the, and this is what I talked to Dr. Kanagala about, like the kind of scavenger hunt, right? That they have to like go rummage through their room or, you know, wherever in their home to kind of find something, you know, in their home that's special to them. And so I kind of thought like that's kind of a fun and like kind of what Melinda talked about with the Healing Centered, right? We want to play, we want to imagine, you know, and we may have students, you know, like Debbie kind of brought up, there may be students that, you know, can't, you know, maybe feel like they can't find something or maybe don't have an item, you know, then they can start using their imagination, right? Like kind of, some of you maybe didn't bring an item today, but you could still kind of with your mind's eye picture something, right? Something that means something to you and write about that. So I just thought that that was, I'll just share that with you. Okay, so just wanted to end with some upcoming events, just kind of give you some news. We will be having in January a new teacher portfolio training that we usually do every year. Obviously this year will be virtually. So that will be coming up. For our high school students, we do have our SLC coming up in March 2021. Are we telling, we're not telling them who the keynote is yet, right? Can I tell them or no? Melinda's like, no, don't tell them. Wait, you're on mute, Melinda.
Go ahead.
Can I tell them?
Yeah.
You want?
No, okay. Anna's saying no. Okay.
Okay, no, we're not telling them. And she keeps us in line, guys. Let me tell you, we were just talking about what would we do without her? What, I don't know. We were a hot mess before she came. But so yes, the SLC is happening in March. It will be virtual, obviously. And then we'll be having our spring components, you know, virtually as well, but that will be in, I believe in March. We're still kind of working on the dates, but we will be having another training in spring. For students coming up, and this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, kind of those opportunities for Puente students to kind of collaborate and talk and meet, you know, cross schools. Youth Speaks is going to be doing a writing opportunity for 10th graders. And I believe, did we extend it to 10th and 11th too, Melinda? Or was it just, yeah, we extended it. So there may be some of your students that kind of cross over from different high schools, right? They'll be working together on this kind of really fun and innovative and really engaging, you know, writing, you know, workshops by Youth Speaks. If you don't know them, they're amazing. Just look them up. Youth Speaks, they're really great, do amazing things. So we'll have that coming up. We also have Las Cafeteras doing a presentation for the 10th and 11th graders. If you didn't get to see the leadership conference, we did I feel like it's almost a month ago with Dr. Cornell West. Cafeteras was there and they did a presentation. So they'll be doing something like that for our students. And then of course, Melinda and I, you know, just love and adore you for all of the hard work you're doing. But if you would like to invite us, if you're doing something fun or, you know, you want to showcase kind of something that's happening in your classroom, you can always reach out to us and invite us to come into your classroom. My middle school teachers already know I'm extra nosy and pushy. So I just come, I just pop in. I'm just going to show up even if you don't invite me. But if there is something special coming up or some event you're coming, because we know the holidays are kind of coming up, so different things are, you know, happening at your site. If you're doing something fun, you know, then just let us know so we can pop in. And I think that's it. Melinda, you want to share any last words of wisdom as always?
Thank you so much for coming. Have a safe and wonderful evening, everybody. It was so good to see you.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for coming.